background is in chemicals, plastics, fabrics, furniture. And he was 57 and a half years old, and the company was selling, and they decided to get rid of everybody who was over 55. This was before the age discrimination laws were out. So he was out of a job. And his boss didn't really want him working for anybody else because he was known when he would travel around, up in Canada, for instance, he was known as Mr. Future. Because he was just totally worked out of the box, just his mind, you know. He taught the first class in plastics at Brooklyn College up in New York. So he's just a really ingenious person. When we looked up in New York, he worked for the Department of Navy. I talked to you before. And when he worked for the Department of Navy, he worked on some of the first fabrics used in space clothing. And he worked on zippers and fasteners used in the Antarctic. So I grew up with this man who was just really interesting. And my mom taught at different universities in clothing. She took Victoria design. And, well, they were driving in the car around Delaware, and my father was not real happy. And he turned to my mom, who was doing her needlework, and she had all of her threads strewn all over the car. And he said, with all your background in design, can't you come up with some way of organizing your threads so that they won't be all over the place? Well, that's what started the business. Because she went home and she created the first needlework organizer on the market. And it had a piece of fabric, and it was a little sandwich, and inside could go the canvas, and then the needles and the threads, and everything could hang in there and fold up, and she could carry it on her wrist. When her neighbor saw it and said, "Oh, Stella, this is great, can you make one for me?" And another neighbor, and then finally, when my dad was going out on the road looking for a job, he would take these out, and at that time there were about 10,000 needlepoint shops at that time. And so he just stopped in every city he was going to and sell this thing. And after 9 months, he still couldn't find a job, so he threw his hat into the ring with my mom, and that's how the business started. And they did all sorts of different types of things. In 1978, they got into the silk business, and they started carrying silk and selling silk. And dabbled a little bit in quilting, but it was mostly needlepoint and cross stitch. And then in 1979, my dad came up with this idea of taking metallic thread, very, very thin ply metallic thread, and making braid. So they hired a company to make metallic braids for them. And then over the years, they purchased more and more braiders. And today we have more than 100 braiding machines in our factory. And so we do major braiding. We make metallic braids in more than 14 different weights and sizes, and in some in 210 colors. So it's just massive. And when you come down to our booth, you'll see a display there with all the colors, and they're all in color order. So they're really